If you're between the ages of 58 and 62 right now, you're standing in what I call the golden window of retirement planning. And here's why that matters. The decisions you make in these next few years will have a bigger impact on your retirement than anything you did in the previous 30 years of saving. That's not an exaggeration. I've seen people in this exact age range make one wrong move and cost themselves over $100,000 in lifetime retirement income. And I've seen others make a few smart adjustments during these years and completely transform their financial future. Today, I'm going to walk you through the 5 critical decisions you need to get right during this window. And I'll be honest with you, the 4th one is the one that catches almost everyone off guard. Most people don't even think about it until it's too late. But before I get to that, let me tell you why this window is so different from any other time in your financial life. After helping people retire for over 15 years at Retire with Clarity, I've noticed something that most financial advice completely ignores. Everyone talks about your 20s and 30s as the most important decades because of compound interest. And yes, starting early matters. But here's what nobody tells you. The years between 58 and 62 are when the real game is won or lost. Why? Because this is when every decision becomes magnified. Think about it this way. In your 30s, if you made a mistake with your 401k allocation, you had 30 years to recover. If you took Social Security at the wrong time, well, you weren't even thinking about Social Security yet. But right now, every choice you make echoes through the next 25 to 30 years of your life. There's no time to recover. There's no, "I'll fix it later." And here's what makes this even more important. Most people in this age range are dealing with a unique combination of pressures. Maybe work is getting more stressful. Maybe your body is telling you it's time to slow down. Maybe you're watching your parents age and realizing that time is truly limited. And in the middle of all that, you're supposed to make the biggest financial decisions of your life? That's exactly why I created this video. To give you clarity during a time when clarity is hard to find. Now, I found that people watching this video typically fall into one of 2 groups. The first group is thinking, "I don't know if I can retire at 62 or 65. I'm worried I don't have enough." If that's you, this video is going to help you understand exactly what you need to focus on to increase your confidence and maybe even retire earlier than you thought. The second group is thinking, "I know I'm going to be okay financially, but I want to make sure I'm optimizing everything. I don't want to leave money on the table." If that's you, I'm going to show you some strategies that could add tens of thousands of dollars to your retirement. Either way, what I'm about to share applies to both groups. And by the end, I'll give you a simple 3-question framework you can use to evaluate any retirement decision you're facing right now. Here's what we're going to cover. I'll start with the biggest financial decision most people in this window face, and it's probably not what you think. Then I'll walk you through the Social Security decision that actually needs to be made years before you claim. After that, I'll reveal the tax optimization window that closes faster than most people realize. The 4th decision is the one I mentioned earlier, the one that catches almost everyone off guard. It has nothing to do with investments or Social Security, and it can cost you thousands of dollars per year if you get it wrong. And finally, I'll share the one non-financial decision that determines whether you'll actually enjoy your retirement or struggle through it. Let's start with that first critical decision. The first decision is what I call the income bridge decision, and it comes down to this simple question. How are you going to pay your bills between when you stop working and when your full retirement income kicks in? Let me explain why this matters so much. I had a client named Richard who came to me when he was 59. He was exhausted from his job in manufacturing management. The stress was affecting his health, and his doctor had actually told him he needed to reduce his stress levels. Richard had about $850,000 saved, and he was thinking about retiring at 60. But here's the problem. His pension didn't start until 62. Social Security, he wanted to delay until at least 67 to get a higher payment. So he was looking at a 7-year gap where he'd have no guaranteed income coming in. When we sat down and did the math, If Richard retired at 60 and pulled money from his retirement accounts to cover that gap, he'd need to withdraw about $65,000 per year. Over 7 years, that's $455,000 just to bridge the gap, more than half of his entire savings. And here's what made it worse. Those early withdrawals would have reduced his portfolio right when he needed it to keep growing. We ran the projections, and his money would have run out by age 83. Richard was devastated. He thought he was ready to retire, and now I was telling him he might not be. But then we looked at it from a different angle. What if, instead of retiring completely at 60, Richard transitioned to a part-time consulting role? He had 35 years of experience in his industry. Companies would pay for that knowledge. So that's exactly what he did. Richard left his stressful full-time job at 60, but he took on consulting work for about 20 hours a week. It brought in $40,000 a year, which meant he only needed to pull $25,000 from his savings instead of $65,000. That one adjustment extended his retirement security by 12 years in our projections. And here's the best part. Richard actually enjoyed the consulting work because he was choosing his projects and setting his own schedule. The stress disappeared. The lesson here is this. The years between 58 and 62 aren't just about deciding when to retire. They're about designing the bridge that gets you from your working income to your retirement income. And that bridge can take many forms: part-time work, consulting, rental income, a spouse's income, or strategic withdrawals from different accounts. But here's where the next decision connects directly to this one. And this is something most people don't think about until it's too late. The second critical decision during this window is what I call your Social Security setup. And notice I said setup, not claiming decision. Most people think Social Security is a decision you make when you turn 62 or 67. But the truth is, the Social Security decision actually gets made during these years between 58 and 62. You're setting the foundation right now. Here's what I mean. Social Security benefits are calculated based on your highest 35 years of earnings. If you stop working at 60 after only 32 years in the workforce, those 3 missing years get counted as zeros. And zeros in your calculation can significantly reduce your benefit. I had a client named Patricia who retired at 59 because her company offered an early retirement package. She had 31 years of solid income, averaging about $75,000 per year. She thought her Social Security would be great. But when we looked at her Social Security statement, those 4 years of zeros in her calculation were reducing her monthly benefit by almost $320 per month. That's $3,840 per year. Over a 25-year retirement, that's more than $96,000 in lost income. Now, Patricia had other resources, so she was going to be okay. But here's what we explored. What if she did some part-time work or consulting for just 2 more years? Even earning $50,000 for those 2 years would replace 2 of those zeros and boost her lifetime Social Security income by over $40,000. She decided it was worth it. Not grueling full-time work, just enough to improve her highest 35 years. But here's where it gets even more strategic. If you're married, the Social Security decision becomes twice as complex, because you're not just optimizing one benefit, you're optimizing 2 benefits, plus potential survivor benefits. I had a couple, James and Linda. James had the higher income throughout their careers. Linda had taken time off to raise their children. When they came to me at ages 60 and 58, their plan was for both of them to claim Social Security at 62 to get money coming in as soon as possible. But when we ran the numbers, we discovered something important. If James delayed his benefit until 70, his monthly payment would be about $3,400 instead of $2,100 at 62. That's an extra $1,300 per month. And here's the crucial part. Linda's survivor benefit, what she would receive if James passed away first, would be based on James's benefit amount. By James delaying until 70, Linda's survivor benefit would also be that higher amount for the rest of her life. Given that women typically live longer than men, This one decision could mean an extra $200,000 for Linda over her lifetime. But James couldn't delay until 70 unless they figured out how to bridge those years. Which brings us back to the first decision. See how these all connect? Before I move on to the third decision, I'd love to hear from you. If you're in this 58 to 62 window right now, what's the question that keeps you up at night? Is it Social Security timing? Is it whether you have enough? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I often create videos based on what you're asking. And if this is helpful so far, click the like button. It helps more people find this information. Now, the third decision is one that has a deadline, and most people don't realize the clock is ticking. The third critical decision is taking advantage of what I call the tax optimization window. And this window is open right now, but it's going to close. Here's what's happening. If you're between 58 and 62 and still working, you're probably in a relatively high tax bracket, maybe 22%, 24%, even 32%. But something interesting happens for many people between when they stop working and when Social Security and required minimum distributions kick in. There's often a gap, sometimes just a few years, where your taxable income drops significantly. You've stopped working, so no salary. Social Security hasn't started yet. RMDs from your retirement accounts haven't started yet. During this gap, you might temporarily drop into the 12% or even 10% tax bracket. And this is when smart retirees do what's called Roth conversions. Let me give you an example. I had a client named Thomas who retired at 61 with about $1.2 million in his traditional 401k. Under current tax law, when Thomas turns 73, he'll be required to start taking money out of that account whether he needs it or not. And every dollar comes out taxed as ordinary income. We projected that by age 73, with modest growth, Thomas's RMDs would be over $60,000 per year, pushing him into higher tax brackets and even potentially increasing the taxes on his Social Security benefits. But here's what Thomas did instead. During ages 62 through 66, while his income was low, he converted about $80,000 per year from his traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. Yes, he paid taxes on those conversions, but at the 12% and 22% brackets instead of the 24% or higher brackets he would have faced later. Over those 5 years, Thomas moved $400,000 into his Roth account. That money will now grow tax-free forever, and it doesn't count toward his RMDs. And when he withdraws it in retirement, he pays 0 federal income tax. We calculated that this strategy will save Thomas and his wife over $180,000 in lifetime taxes, and it also gives them more control over their taxable income in retirement. But here's the thing, this window doesn't last forever. If Thomas had waited until his RMDs started, the opportunity would have been gone. And there's another deadline most people don't know about. Current tax law, the rates we have right now, they're scheduled to expire at the end of 2025. Tax brackets could go up after that. So, the window for this strategy isn't just the gap between work and RMDs. It might also be the gap between now and the end of 2025. Now, the fourth decision is the one I mentioned at the beginning, the one that catches almost everyone off guard. And honestly, it's the one I wish more people talked about. The fourth critical decision is solving what I call the healthcare gap. And this is the one that derails more early retirement plans than almost anything else. Here's the situation. Medicare doesn't start until you're 65, so if you retire at 60, 61, or 62, you need to figure out how to cover your health insurance for 3 to 5 years. And most people massively underestimate how expensive this is. I had a client couple, David and Maria. They were both 60, in good health, and they had $1.1 million saved. On paper, they looked ready to retire. But then we talked about health care. They had been covered by David's employer plan, paying only $400 per month for both of them. When we looked at what comparable coverage would cost on the open market, we were looking at over $2,200 per month. That's $26,400 per year just for health insurance. David and Maria were shocked. That one expense would consume almost all of the investment income they were planning to live on. They came to me thinking they could retire in 6 months. They left that meeting realizing they needed to rethink their entire plan. But here's where it gets interesting. We started exploring options. First, we looked at the Affordable Care Act marketplace. Based on their projected retirement income, they might qualify for subsidies that could bring their premium down to around $800 per month. That's still double what they were paying, but it was much better than $2,200. However, and this is crucial, those subsidies are based on your income. Remember Thomas and his Roth conversions? This is where that strategy can actually hurt you if you're not careful. If David and Maria did large Roth conversions like Thomas did, it would increase their taxable income for that year. And higher income means smaller healthcare subsidies, or no subsidies at all. So we had to balance the tax optimization strategy against the healthcare subsidy strategy. It's like a chess game where every move affects 3 other pieces. For David and Maria, we found a middle ground. They decided David would keep working until 63 to maintain employer coverage for 3 more years. Maria would retire at 60. When David retired at 63, they'd only need to cover 2 years until Medicare. During those 2 years, they would do modest Roth conversions, enough to take advantage of lower tax brackets, but not so much that they'd lose their healthcare subsidies. This is why I say the years between 58 and 62 are when the real game is won or lost. These decisions don't exist in isolation. They're all connected, and optimizing one area without considering the others can cost you a fortune. But now I want to talk about the 5th decision. And this one has nothing to do with money. But I've seen it make or break more retirements than any dollar amount ever could. The 5th critical decision during this window is beginning what I call the identity shift. Let me explain. For the past 30 or 40 years, you've had an answer to the question, what do you do? You're an engineer, you're a nurse, you're a manager, a teacher, a business owner. That identity has shaped your daily schedule, your social connections, your sense of purpose, and honestly, a lot of your self-worth. And then one day, it's gone. I had a client named Robert who was a senior vice president at a large corporation. He retired at 62 with more than enough money. Financially, he was set for life. 6 months later, Robert was struggling. He wasn't depressed exactly, but he felt lost. He told me, I used to have 200 emails a day. People needed me. Decisions waited for my input. Now, nothing. I feel invisible. Robert's wife said she didn't recognize him anymore. The confident, driven man she'd been married to for 35 years had become someone who wandered around the house unsure of what to do with himself. Here's what I've learned after watching hundreds of people go through this transition. The retirees who struggle are the ones who wait until after they retire to figure out who they want to become. The ones who thrive? They start that identity work during this 58 to 62 window. So here's my challenge to you. Right now, while you're still working, start asking yourself these questions. What brings you energy outside of work? What would you do if money weren't a factor? What relationships have you neglected that you want to rebuild? Don't wait until your last day of work to start this exploration. The 58 to 62 window is when you should be planting those seeds. Now, I promised you a framework to help you evaluate any retirement decision you're facing. Here it is. 3 questions I call the clarity test. Question 1. What is this decision actually going to cost me? In dollars, in time, and in options? Every choice during this window has a cost. Sometimes it's obvious, like the taxes on a Roth conversion. Sometimes it's hidden, like the healthcare subsidies you might lose. Sometimes it's an opportunity cost, the growth you miss by withdrawing money too early. Before you make any decision, get clear on the true total cost. Question 2. What does this decision make possible or impossible 5 years from now? This is the long-term thinking question. Will this choice give you more options or fewer options down the road? The best decisions during this window tend to be ones that preserve flexibility. Question 3. Am I making this decision from fear or from clarity? This one is simple but powerful. Fear-based decisions during this window, like retiring too early because you're burned out or working too long because you're scared, those rarely turn out well. The best decisions come from a place of clear-eyed understanding of your situation. If you can answer these 3 questions clearly for any decision you're facing, you'll make better choices during this critical window. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The years between 58 and 62 are not just another phase of your financial life. They're the final preparation years before the biggest transition most people ever make. And yes, you need to get the numbers right, the income bridge, the Social Security strategy, the tax optimization, the healthcare coverage. These all matter enormously. But remember, Robert, the money wasn't his problem. The lack of purpose was. The happiest retirees I work with aren't the ones with the biggest portfolios. They're the ones who used this window wisely, not just to optimize their finances, but to optimize their lives. They entered retirement knowing who they wanted to become, not just what they were leaving behind. If this video gave you some clarity on what you should be focusing on during this critical window, do me a favor, hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people in this same situation find these videos. And if you want to go deeper, I've got a video right here that walks you through the exact steps to calculate your retirement number. It's the perfect next step after what we talked about today. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.